computer. Amazing. Turn off here. Incredible. And then just can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see screen right now? Incredible. Okay. So again, I just really want to thank you guys all for being here with me this afternoon. This is going to be the first of several family college seminars that are designed to have a parallel experience of what your children are going through with me and Lynn for the remainder of this year. As with any session we do, as questions come up, please do feel free to add them in the chat box. I am intentionally leaving space at the end to answer any questions that you guys may have. As always, if there are questions that are specific to your child and your child's particular process, that is probably best left for individual conversations between you and your child's college counselor. But if there are questions that can be applicable and general for everyone to benefit from, please do feel free to ask them towards the end of today's session. So to provide a little bit of an overview of what we'll talk about this afternoon, we'll just go over some quick norms, talk a little bit about how we grade and engage with this experience with your children. We'll talk about self-reflection as a starting point of the college process, give you an insight into what Lynn and I do as college counselors. I'm going to share with you an overview of both what this course will look like for your children, but also for you as family members. I want to give a brief update about where we are with standardized testing, talk a little bit about summer planning, do some engaging work, hopefully technology works for me today, debunk some college myths, and then lastly, talk a little bit about the homework that we have for students in preparation for next session, just so that you're aware of the kinds of thinking and the kinds of thought processes that we are engaging with your children with. So with norms, as we are entering this space, and similar to what we've done with your children, is we wanted to provide a set of questions that are realities of what this process will look like, understanding the different histories that are present in the room today. So making sure that we are doing the best as possible, and Lynn and I are doing the best as possible to create a space that's democratized, folks understand what the information is, and folks understand that we're all coming at this with different histories and different understandings of a process that can feel opaque at best. So how is it that we can show up to this space to not only engage in the learning, but engage and facilitate in learning for all? So we asked that, and recognize rather, that there's a lot of jargon that's used in college admissions. How can I ask for moments of clarification? Each individual is unique, so each individual's college process will differ. How can I acknowledge and normalize these differences? This process brings about a lot of feelings for students and families. How can I care for myself? How can I care for my child? And how can I be a good community member to others? And I want to spend a little bit of time on this particular point because this is something that we emphasize a lot to students. This is, of course, an individual process, and we're not going to be sharing what's specific to your child, right? And this is a process that everyone, children and families alike, are going through at the same time. So thinking about the moments in which we can come together as a community to promote and center wellness is really important. It's important to my practice, it's important to Lynn, it's important to us as an upper school. So really thinking about how we can both care for ourselves as the individuals, care for ourselves as the adults caring for children, and then care for the entire community, I think is a really important factor to consider. And then lastly, how can I work in partnership with my child's college counselor to ensure my child's well-being throughout the college process? So again, this idea of wellness is really centered in all that we do. And if there's things that we can do more of, or if there's practices that you would like for us to engage more with, please always let us know. We are not so rigid in our philosophy or what we do that we can't be flexible to insight and advice. So please, if there's anything ever that feels that we can do in best practices in support of your children and in support of you, let us know. We are absolutely here for you. So as your children are engaging in this class, it's important for us to note that they will be with us once every 2 weeks in our 10-day cycle. This is a pass-fail class. We aren't creating work for your children to create more stress. In fact, we hope that through this experience, not only are they learning a lot about how to undergo and really understand the ins and outs of the college process, but they're becoming more reflective thinkers. that they're better to articulate their thoughts, their perspectives, their dreams, their hopes, their desires, their fears, questions, big questions that as an adult, I often don't find myself asking unless someone is asking it on for me to think about. And this process reflects a big turning point in the lives of our students. And for many of them, they're being approached with these big questions, perhaps for the first time. And that can be really intimidating, right? To be asked what's next. So we're creating an experience for them that's intentionally asking them these questions and providing the space for them to answer it honestly with some scaffolding so that we are providing them with feedback about how to engage in a reflective process in a way that feels really meaningful. So I share this with you because, again, it's a pass fail course. Your children have to work very hard to fail this class, but we will be giving them assignments that are meant to be getting them in the process of reflection, because that is such an important skill that lies at the heart of the college application process. So the more comfortable we can get them with that, the earlier, the better it will be for everyone. I'll dive into this a little bit later as well, but here are the course topics for the next 8 to 9 weeks. And some students, depending on their schedules and how that aligns with time off, may have 8 sessions, may have 9 with us. But the idea here is that by the end of this experience, they are informed consumers, so to speak, of the college process, and they're walking away with tangible work to do and continue from going into summer months. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So, as I mentioned earlier, that reflective thinking is really at the heart of the college process. And it's really at the heart of this semester right now. As I've been engaging with first and second meetings with students, I've been affirming to them that there is no expectation that they have everything figured out right now. In fact, it is very rare if a student has the next 3 to 4 years figured out, or even the next year figured out. But if we can get them to this place where they're really thinking about themselves, really centering their goals, and being able to articulate what that looks like, what that sounds like, what that feels like, then they're able to go into different communities and explore new opportunities with a great deal of intention. College is a business, and college admissions is, at its heart, marketing and experience, marketing and education to your children. And what I hope is that as they're going on visits, as they're going on tours, as they're engaging with admissions officers, that they're both able to receive the information that's being presented to them, but understand it through the lens of what's important for them. So that instead of being swayed by the glitz and glamour of what these various institutions represent, they're instead being able to approach it with an understanding of who they are and what they need, and able to assess every piece of information that's coming their way as a mechanism of understanding if it fits their needs and their goals. So this is really kind of reflective of what the junior spring experience is like. And this is really reflective of how we've created this experience for students and families alike. So as we're going into this process, we talked about this during junior college night, but Dylan and I found it important to re-emphasize this just to really be extremely clear about what our job is as college counselors. So above all else, we are your supporters, we're your advocates, and we're your cheerleaders throughout this process. So there is no ask that's too small or too big that we wouldn't do without a smile, and really with open arms. So please know that we are here for you and for your children every single step of the way. We are also here to provide programming to expand horizons for all of our students, right? So we want them to understand that the world is their oyster, and that as they're going through their process, that they themselves have left no stone unturned. So we're always thoughtful about how we're presenting programming, not only to our juniors, but to our entire upper school division, about the totality and the vastness of what college is, not only in the United States, but also as broad as well. We will work to provide honest advice and data-driven insight on college list building and balancing college lists. We're going to provide feedback on every single element of the college application process, and this includes but not limited to required essays and required and or optional essays. So we are here helping your child come up with ideas, brainstorm ideas, flesh out stories, help them understand how to write these questions. Anything really that comes with the process, we're going to be there, guiding them along the way. prepare them for more tangible pieces, such as interviews or conversations around testing. For students who are thinking about financial aid or have conversations about affordability, we'll also be here as supporters in those conversations. We are going to write your child's recommendation letter. And this is really, really important. We'll talk in future sessions about the components of the application process and why they matter. But I want to uplift this one early on because there is no one in your child's application process who will know every piece of the puzzle except for us, except for Lynn and I. We know more or less what student teachers are going to write. We are obviously working with students to craft their applications, so we have an understanding of how their voice is peering through in the application. So our responsibility of many in that recommendation letter is to be the through line, to thread together the pieces of a child's application to help an admissions officer really understand the totality of who this person is as a student, as a leader, as a community member, and as someone who's entering and getting ready for the next stage of their life, right? It's why we're so committed to getting to know your children, seeing them beyond just the college counseling space, and really entering their lives in any which way that we can, because we want to write the most supportive piece of the most supportive letter that we possibly can. And we recognize that the counselor letter is really the biggest piece of advocacy that we can provide and share with colleges. So we want to make sure that we're getting that right. So we share this piece with students and emphasize this particular note because we want to get to know them. We want to make sure that it's our responsibility as counselors to help break that ice and develop trust, but we want them to know that this is part of why we're really here for them. And our job is to just make sure that they trust and believe that. So know that that is kind of the level of support and advocacy that you'll be getting throughout this process. For anyone who's applying for scholarships, we're going to also guide them on that. And then lastly, we're here to provide support and guidance about decision making. And this goes from the time that your children will apply to college in the fall of their senior year up until when they graduate. And they're trying to think about where is it that they want to go and why do they want to go and how can we support them as a community to have a successful transition to college and beyond. Lynn and I will be central figures in all of those conversations with students. So it's, as you can imagine, not just applying to college. There's so many other skills that we're helping to cultivate and build upon through our work together. As we were creating this experience, there were certain learning goals that I hope every family walks away from this experience. The first being becoming an informed consumer of sorts of the college application process. So making sure that you understand what's ahead of you, how to go about it, and how to ask the right kinds of questions. We want to make sure that you are able and walk away with concrete strategies about how to support your child's comfort with introspection, which will be again important not only now, but certainly when it gets time to actually crafting the application. We want these seminars to also complement individual meetings. So even though students are going through this experience, and even though you guys are going to be going through this experience as well, this is not intended to replace one-on-one meetings with your child's college counselor. So please make sure that you are engaging with us as much as you need to, because that is still how we are going to engage, and really that's the bulk of our work together throughout the next year. Through this experience, we're going to also lay the groundwork for a smooth college process so that everyone walks away this summer and goes into the fall feeling really empowered and really understanding what the work is up ahead. And then lastly, working to help connect your child's interests with opportunities available at various colleges and developing the skills and the frameworks to do that successfully. So just to provide a little bit of an overview of what the student experience is going to look like, because it will be a little bit different from the family experience, is to really think about this course in thirds. So the first third is really building on that introspective, reflective experiences, helping students understand how they center themselves before they begin doing college research, and how they can use the various tools and resources at their disposal to begin making informed choices about fit. So that's the first third of this experience. The second third of this experience is going to be about expanding their horizon, helping students understand the vastness of opportunities that exist, not only in the US, but also internationally as well. And as we're gearing up to engage with more and more admissions officers, especially in our May college fair, we want to make sure that students feel really comfortable knowing the kinds of questions that for them would be important to ask, helping them understand how to make the most of their time while they're engaging not only with admissions folks, but also on college campuses so that they're really getting the best of the experience. And the last third of the course, as we wrap out the school year, is getting started on this process. So we are working with students to begin their applications, to begin filling it out. We will begin working on personal statements and essays. And throughout every experience and every class session, every child's part of their homework will be some writing exercise. And the intention behind that is not only to develop the reflective skills, reflection skills, but also to help develop and begin developing a cache of ideas that they may then use for future essays. So knowing again that everything we do here by design is very intentional so that they aren't exposed the very first time to the idea of a college essay in June, that we're really kind of interspersing that information throughout this experience. And once they leave at the end of the year, they have something tangible to work off of. The family experience is not too dissimilar. But as you can imagine, the last third of this experience for students, you guys won't be writing their essays. That's the one-on-one work we'll have with students, but we'll follow a similar timeline where it's similarly engaging you with the types of skills that we will need for students to be successful in this process. And our intention is to help you guys develop strategies and frameworks to go along and understand what your child is going through and how you can best support them at every stage of this experience. So what they'll know, and you'll know the right questions to ask them at every step of the direction. And hopefully this helps facilitate healthier and more productive conversations at home. And what I'm hoping for too, as we tell students, is talk to your parents. They love you. They're here to support you. They're not trying to overwhelm you, but you got to give them something so that they understand you, that you're actually working and engaging with this process. So hopefully you seeing this reaffirms, and the children will also see this too, that there has to be, some meeting in the middle here. And, teenagers don't always love to be forthright with their parents, and we know this, but we're trying to also help them kind of understand how they best can do that and partner with you guys and really recognize the importance and the value of doing so. So one resource that's really, really important and I want to just lift up is the college counseling page on my BFS. So Lynn and I launched this page about 2 months ago, or maybe even about a month ago. And it is really our kind of handbook of sorts of information about everything that you could or would want to know about the college process, how we manage it here at Brooklyn Friends, upcoming events, so on and so forth. So if you haven't checked out this page just yet, I really encourage you to take some time today and just peruse through it. It's under the groups category, and then you'll see a link that says college counseling. Every event that we have for the remainder of the semester is listed on the front. And then when you go on the topics page, Lynn and I have curated different buckets of information that we think would be helpful for families, regardless of whether they are in the process. This is open to every single family in our community, from lower school through the upper school. So if you have questions, if you're curious to learn a little bit more about the college process, if you know that your child is going to go through and wants to go through a conservatory style education, or you have questions about financial aid, or if you want to go see past recordings of past events, everything will live in our college counseling page. So take a look at it. It's in process, and we always want to be responsive to the needs and wants of our community. So if there are topics that are not covered that you would love to learn a little bit more about and you think would be beneficial for the community at large, please let me know and we can work on developing that page for everybody. I want to take some time to just give a brief update on testing. As you may have remembered from a couple slides ago, we will have a session about trends in higher education in late April, but because there have been some conversations happening nationally about testing, and most recently Dartmouth College reinstituting and requiring testing anew for this upcoming class, I know that for some students and families alike, it has generated some anxiety about what's coming next. What should we be prepared to do? Is Dartmouth reinstituting testing going to be indicative of what other colleges in their peer group, is that something that they too are going to do? And certainly, given who Dartmouth is, um, and the ways in which our popular media tends to really focus in on the most selective schools in the country, I understand the anxiety that builds up, right? There's a lot of pieces about Dartmouth's recent decision, but there were very few, if any, articles about the fact that Cornell and Vanderbilt this past week have extended their test optional policies, right? So I don't want you guys to feel that what is being pushed forward in popular media is reflective of what's happening nationally or even globally. So I want to share this resource, and I may have done this at a later presentation, but Compass Education Group has a really fabulous blog that I refer to quite often. And this page in particular is a really good resource because they are looking at the most sought out after schools or the most popular schools of sorts and keeping constant tabs of test optional policies. And what I appreciate about this particular list is that it also tells you when the policies are set to expire. So there are a handful of schools that their test optional policies are set to expire this year, but that is the minority of colleges and universities across the country. Most test optional policies are continuing at least through next year. So your children will still be going through a process in which the vast majority of colleges are going to be test optional. But it's also important so that you see what's out there and you understand and kind of are operating off of real data. What's also important to name, though, is that you have conversations with your college counselor about testing as it relates to your child and their goals and their aspirations. It's really hard to give broad advice about testing to everyone because every child is going to differ, and testing may or may not be in the wheelhouse of every single child. But what we can do is just acknowledge that there could be conversations that will be changing. We will have more information in the weeks and months to come as schools are slowly updating the public about what their policies are. Lynn and I are keeping a very close eye out with these updates and with these changes so that we're aware in case we need to shift any of our thinking, any of our strategizing with students. But most importantly, it's really important to recognize that you talked with us about what makes the most sense for your child because that advice will differ student to student. So I just wanted to name that. And of course, we'll continue that conversation with our students, with you all, as these things do evolve. Want to talk a little bit about summer planning to shift focus just a little bit, because summer planning really begins now. I'm getting bombarded with an abundance of opportunities from a variety of different organizations about summer programs, academic experiences, service experiences, so on and so forth. And those applications are typically open now with deadlines coming as soon as March and April. So it's never too early to begin thinking about the planning at the moment. And while summer planning is going to look different student to student because there isn't a magic recipe of what to do, I think folks assume that because this is the summer going into your senior year, that this somehow, some way becomes the most important summer of your child's 4-year journey through high school. That really isn't the case, right? This summer isn't going to something is going to magically happen that all of a sudden will make your child a standout applicant. I promise your children are already standout applicants, right? But really do take some time to have conversations with your children about what matters for your child and for your family as well, right? Does your child want an academic experience that's going to expose them to something richer or deeper than what they're learning at Brooklyn Friends? Do they want an experience to perhaps get a preview of something that they may want to major in? Or are they looking for something different because your child is that kind of intellectually curious student who really gets motivated by learning, who likes to learn independently? And that's really kind of what gets their gears going. How can we help facilitate that learning and make sure that they are doing something that feels productive with their time? Is your student an athlete and wants to continue in their athletic endeavors, regardless of whether they want to be someone who's getting recruited for college or not? Know and understand that that's valid too. Does your child want to work and experience what it is to have a quote unquote grown up job and make their own money and be more independent in that regard? that's valid too. There is nothing that trumps the other, because for us, the why matters so much more than the what, right? And I would argue that it's the same for college admissions officers. They want to understand, why is it that children are doing what they're doing, and what is it that they're learning from those experiences, right? And this is what I really want to encourage and impress upon as you're having conversations with your children about the summer, is really getting them to think about, what is it that they want to experience, and why do they think that would be a good use of their time, right? It may fit into a plan about what they want to do for college or for careers, but if it doesn't, that's okay too, right? As long as they feel like their time is being well spent and that it's being purposeful, right? If you need a starting point, we have a summer programs guide on my BFS, which is a live document of opportunities that have come in our way, many of which that we've also cultivated as well. We're beginning to also generate recommendations from our senior class. So we're making a little note if it's a program that a current senior has participated in it, so that we have a cache of experiences that students have enjoyed and really benefit from. So take a look at that if you haven't done so already. I will name that it is heavily leaning towards academic enrichment programs. And as I wrote in the summer programs guide, what I also want to uplift is that just because your child does a program at a university doesn't make them more competitive for that particular university. So it's really important to disassociate the school itself from the program itself, right? If it's an academic program that your child wants to do because they really want to learn in that particular subject, that's fabulous. And I love that. But just because it's at Brown or Harvard or Georgetown doesn't make it more impressive or more meaningful or less meaningful, right? So just remind yourselves of that this isn't a one-way ticket into that particular institution, and really view it for what it is, which is an academic enrichment experience that just so happens to be housed at that particular university. If you have questions about summer plans or programs, or if you're or you and your children are kind of in process of thinking about different ideas, please be in communication with Lynn and I, and we'll be happy to facilitate and your thinking and facilitate the conversations. I also want to talk about prioritizing family too, right? Perhaps you have family traditions that you care about. Perhaps there's familial obligations that you have to center. And also knowing that that's valid too. Please don't lose sight about that, right? We understand the pressures that the college admissions process can bring about, but also we want to ensure that, your family, your sense of togetherness, your sense of tradition and culture also matter too. So if there's moments in the summer where that is your time to spend with your children, and you want to protect that, honor that, and that's valid, and just know that that is something that's absolutely fine to do. The summer can also be a really good time to visit colleges, and in fact, this is when the bulk of college visits happen. When I used to work in admissions, the busiest time of the year for us was always the summer, and then in the fall, major holidays when schools were out. So it's not going to be uncommon for students to be taking tours. This is a really, really popular time. We recognize, though, that what's missing out in the summer is the student experience. You're not going to, many college campuses, aren't going to have their typical students on campus. There may be some movement, some energy as folks are engaging in summer programs. It's going to feel different. And it's important to acknowledge and name that for your child and help them see beyond that, right? So just because a college campus may feel empty in the summer doesn't mean that that couldn't be a good fit for your child. But sometimes we just have to remind them of that reality if they're experiencing a campus without students there. If you can't make visits in person, and I can guarantee you, you're not going to be able to see every school that your child will ultimately apply to, take advantage of virtual opportunities. There's been a byproduct of the pandemic where every college now has, done a pretty decent job of having remote opportunities to engage with the college or the university, whether that's an information session, a virtual tour, specialized programming by, academic interests, so on and so forth. Take advantage of that. In fact, I would say You may even benefit from doing a virtual experience before ever seeing something in person, just to save on some time and resources. So make sure that you are building in time with your child to engage with this process and making some visits, whether it's in person or virtual. Also, make sure that you're helping your child understand how to balance and negotiate their time. As an IB school, this will be a particularly challenging time for students because over the summer, they should be thinking and preparing for the college application process and beginning some of their essay writing. But also, if your child is in the full IB diploma program, they need to and really should be taking the summer to work on their extended essay. So if that ends up being two really substantive writing exercises that they're going to have to engage with. And really, some students are better primed to do one or the other, or perhaps both at the same time, depends on your child. But these are big writing projects. Have them talk through what their plans are for the summer, help them create a schedule to keep them accountable so that that's way when they get back in the fall, they feel better equipped to kind of pick up where they left off in the summer and hit the ground running. Because senior fall is a really busy time period, but the better your child can manage their time in the summer and get ahead of the curve, I promise you, the easier everything will be. And if you need support with that, please let us know and we will help figure that out with you and your children. And then lastly, and certainly not least, is don't overprogram your child. Rest matters. We want them to be well. I want them to come back in the fall and feel energized and ready for the school year. It's hard when a child, first day of school is already exhausted because they've just been running themselves thin over the summer. Prioritize rest. They've worked hard. They deserved it. You don't need to have every single piece of their summer figured out. So make sure that you are also planning for some rest and restoration. So I want to take some time, next probably 10 minutes or so. I'm hoping this actually works. To do a little bit of an engaging exercise with you guys. So let's see if I can get this to work. And if we don't, here we go. Calls and prizzes. Oh, we don't have one breakout room. Sorry, I probably should have figured this out earlier. Okay, got it. So this is an exercise that we ran through with the children. Some common questions that Lynn and I thought about as we think about some of the most common myths that we hear about and we experience in the college process. So we have just some questions here, some multiple choice questions. And I want to give you guys maybe a couple minutes, just answer them as best as you know. There's no judgment if we have the right answers, no judgment if we have the wrong answers. But engage with this quiz. And then I wanted to take some time to do some debunking as we work through each of the questions. So I'll give you about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll take it from there. I love the chat box. Listen, Zoom is hard and it's fine. Listen, I launched this and I will name that I didn't quite test it out. So please, if you guys are like, I didn't intend to do this. What's going on? What is Zoom? I don't know. We're figuring it out all together. Don't worry. No one's gonna get, a letter grade from this, and we will still learn and engage with the learning together. All right, give you about, just for the interest of time, I'll give everybody about a minute more. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and run through the questions. If you're still filling out the poll, please feel free to do so. If you submitted your questions and you can no longer see them, that is a-okay. For those families who are going to be viewing this presentation later, I'm going to just read the questions out so that folks can understand what's happening. So it probably doesn't show on the Zoom screen. And then we'll kind of talk through and debunk some of these myths. So the first question was, for the fall of 22, what was the average admit rate for four-year nonprofit colleges in the United States? And the options were 49%, 88%, 73%, and 52%. So it was about a 50-50 tie between 49% and 52%, but the correct answer is actually 73%. So the average admit rate for the fall of 2022 for students applying to colleges, four-year colleges in the US, was 73%. And I love beginning with the statistic, especially for students, as a reminder that the majority of schools in this country take the majority of applicants. I think when we are in independent schools in particular, we may be hyper focused on the most selective schools in this country, but that is a very, very, very small sliver of the vast opportunities that are present for students and for families. And sometimes hearing this number, I can see kids' shoulders relaxing and just understanding, because some of them come into this process thinking, I'm not going to college, I'm not good enough. And of course, I remind them of how great they are, and also remind them that, hey, there's a lot of really fabulous opportunities here, a lot of great colleges that will love to take you, and understanding that that is the majority of this experience, even if it's not always the schools that we most commonly look at. So the second question was, which of the following statement is not true about a liberal arts college? They can vary in size from very small, under 1K students, to very large, over 10,000 students. A liberal arts college focuses on a broad, well-rounded education. Professors at liberal arts colleges prioritize teaching over learning. Students have access to research opportunities. So the statement that is not true is actually the first one, that they can vary in size from very small to very large. And that's kind of a trick question, because liberal arts colleges can be very small. And there are certainly liberal arts schools that are about 1,000 students and maybe even a little less. But by design, most liberal arts schools are going to be less than 4,000 to 5,000 students. So it's intended to be a small campus community with all of these others statements being true about the experience as well. I think that for some students, they associate the size of a liberal arts college with a lack of opportunities and resource. And that's really not the case. And I say that as someone who graduated from a liberal arts college and then went to a much larger university for graduate school, is that these small liberal arts colleges have an abundance of opportunities, especially considering the size of these schools. But the size really is what makes them more unique compared to larger universities, which are trying to cater to, as you can imagine, a much broader audience. Question number 3. It is more difficult to be admitted to a college if you're considered an out-of-state student. True, false, it depends. And the correct answer is, it depends. If you are applying to a public university, so a university that's funded by the government or state government, then yes, that your residency does matter quite a bit, right? So if you're applying to a school in California, and let's say you are applying to one of the University of California school systems, universities rather, being an out-of-state student, your admit rate is probably going to be much smaller, and it's going to be much more competitive than if your child was a resident of the state of California, right? But that's not always universally true. There are some public universities who actually will take more out-of-state students because of their because and if a student is able to pay out-of-state tuition, right? So it brings in and generates more revenue for the university, right? So some public universities will actually be more favorable for out-of-state students than not. If your children are thinking about private universities, then that doesn't matter at all. Whether it's a private school in New York or outside of New York, that your residency has no bearing on the admissions process. Question number 4. Private universities are less affordable than public universities. True, false, it depends. And the majority of folks got it right here. It depends. And that really depends on a number of factors. Certainly, public universities are going to have a smaller sticker price than private universities, especially if it's a private university in the same state that your child resides in. So our state university system of New York is going to be significantly cheaper than private universities in New York or in other places of the country. However, depending on your family's financial circumstances, this is when the conversation changes, right? If you are a family who needs substantial financial aid, a private university could actually be much more affordable because private universities tend to have much more resources dedicated towards financial aid, whereas public universities, the state governments try to reduce the cost as much as possible for the majority of families in the state, but that may mean less financial resources to make that happen. So for some families, public universities could be more expensive because there's less financial aid. But as you can imagine, for some families, perhaps you're not qualifying for a significant amount of financial aid for a private university, and then the public one is cheaper given where your family is. So it is really dependent on your family and your specific financial circumstances. Question number 5, which teachers should write your child's recommendation letter? The teacher your child gets along with, the teacher who can attest to your child's academic ability, the teacher who your child perceives as their friend, the teacher who gave your child the best grade. And you guys are unanimous and you guys are correct. The teacher who can attest to your child's academic abilities. This one always trips students up. It's always interesting to see where the answers lie here, but you guys all have it and hit the nail on the head. The teacher recommendation, the purpose of it is to help admissions officers understand who your child is as a student and as a member of a classroom community. And this isn't always going to be the teacher who gives your child the best grade, but can be and should be the teacher for whom your child feels they show up the very best at. And it doesn't mean that it's the class that your child is the loudest in, right? Because that isn't something that is always going to be, shouldn't always be favored. But it is about, is your child going above and beyond? Are they submitting assignments? Are they good about making corrections? Do they go to office hours? Are they trying to engage with their peers when it's time for small group work? All of those things are really valid and really important. And what we've tasked our students to do is, after this first session, was to really just think about this as they're navigating their days and their weeks, to really think about where is it that they show up best. We will ask students to begin asking for recommendations in May. So we want them to start thinking about that, even if it's passively now. So when that time comes, they know exactly who to ask and they know exactly why. The next question is, your child's final results on their IB exams only matter to international universities. True, false, it depends. And there's a 50-50 split here, but the answer is it depends. And this is a little bit of a trick question. So yes, it is true. Depending on the university abroad, and this tends to be more universally true than not, your child's admission is based off of their IB results. So they may get a conditional acceptance offer in which the university would say, out of 45 total points, we expect that you score at least 30 points to be given the opportunity to attend our university, which means that your child at minimum must achieve that score when they take the IB exam in their senior year, and they will not get the results until July of their senior year. So that's important to note. For the colleges in the United States, the final IB results aren't a part of the admissions process. So colleges in the US are not asking for predicted IB grades, and colleges in the United States are not making admissions decisions based off of what your predicted IB results may look like. They're looking exclusively at your transcript, the history of how you've done at Brooklyn Friends in the 4 years, and the slate of courses that your child has chosen to take. Where this matters and where the IB results matter has to do with course placement, course credit, and any other benefits that the university wants to offer your children. So, for instance, at the University of Connecticut, they mentioned that if your child comes in with 20 credits that they've received from the IB exam, then they are able to bring their car freshman year. So there may be incentives that the colleges may provide for solid IB results. This will differ institution to institution, but this is why we emphasize so importantly that students take this exam seriously, because that could mean more opportunities for them to take elective courses. It may mean less required courses that they have to take. And in some instances, if you're coming in with a significant number of credits, it may mean graduating early, depending on the institution. So there are really real benefits of taking the IB exam seriously. The difference is that in terms of admissions in the United States, your final IB results have no bearing. The next question. Colleges use quota systems for how many students they admit from a particular school community. True, false, it depends. And the answer to this one is false. So no college operates on a quota system. Quota systems are illegal. We'll talk a little bit about the affirmative action case in June, that decision that was released back in June in a future session. So the idea that a school has or is limited to the number of students it can take from a particular community is not only false, but also very, very, very illegal. And the reason why we bring up this question is because depending on how our students fare, students make assumptions about, does this school like us or does this school hate us? So if this year Wesleyan only takes 2 students, does that mean next year it's going to only take 2 or none? And this is a conversation that happens and I hear time and time again, no matter what institution I'm working at. And the reality is that schools are free to do whatever they want. They're free to admit whoever they want. They're free to deny whoever they want. They're free to take however many students that they want if the students and the pool of students who apply are the appropriate fit, right? There are lots of examples of schools here at Brooklyn Friends that consistently, year after year after year, if a student applies, historically, they get in and we favor really well, right? And that's not because the school must admit all of our students. It's because our students are the right fit in all measures for that particular institution, right? So it's important that we debunk that particular myth. Next question. Which of these statements is true about extracurricular activities? The more activity your child lists, the better. Your child's activities must align with their intended major or career. Only organized activities such as sports, clubs, or internships count. None of the above. And the correct answer is none of the above. Similar to how we talked about summer programs, the what matters so much more than the why. For the students applying through the Common Application, they can list up to 10 activities, but it doesn't mean that they have to list 10 activities. And having more activities doesn't mean it's more quality, doesn't mean it's a better applicant, especially if your child is doing more, but committing themselves less to each thing that they do or spreading themselves really thinly across all of these activities. I'd much rather see students really give it their all in fewer things so that they have the opportunity to focus and really make an engaged impact on activities versus feeling compelled to do a lot for the sake of doing a lot, right? So it's always focused on the why more than the what. The next question is, which of the following factors are not considered in the US News and World Reports of college rankings? Overall satisfaction of current students or alumni, financial resources available at the college, faculty salaries, or number of citations per faculty member publications. And the correct answer is overall satisfaction of current students or alumni. So no reporting of college rankings is satisfaction and student survey data a part of their calculus, right? I want to acknowledge that ratings and rankings are something that we all look at, that we all acknowledge exists. For some families and for some students, it may matter more to some than it does for others. And we're not here to judge that. But what I present to students and families, this particular factoid, is to make sure that folks understand what the calculus is behind these rankings and to challenge them. Because a highly ranked school doesn't mean very happy students or really engaged student body, right? There are particular factors that these institutions are measuring, and schools have to opt in to being ranked. So there are some schools that will never appear on these reports and these ranking lists because they've chosen to opt out of submitting data to be a part of these rankings, right? So while I understand the role they play within our culture, for me, it's always just about assessing what that means and to look at it with a critical eye. And then the last question is, the college admissions process is a reflection of your child's ability and value. And overwhelmingly, you all know that this is false, that this is not a reflection of who your child is, what they're capable of, how they're great, the ways in which they will make contributions and continue to grow in their lives. It is not. And this is a message that we drill home to students all the time, especially now when we think about them a year from today and they're thinking about the various stages of the process that they may be in. Some may be in and done, some may be still in it, but we want to emphasize that every turning point is that they are incredible human beings, independent of final outcomes, and that we fully believe that their greatness does not lie in what schools that they go to, because they're going to make these communities better, not the other way around. So thank you all for indulging me in this exercise, and I hope that it did debunk some myths and you learned something new from this exercise. So I just want to quickly round out and just present the final few slides before we wrap up for today. This is the homework that we have students do because we want you to be aware of what's happening in our classes. So in our first session, we asked students to respond to the following questions. Why do I want to go to college? If I want to go to college, what are 3 things I hope to experience or accomplish through my college years? If I don't want to go to college, or if college isn't the immediate next step, what are the 3 things I hope to accomplish after graduating high school? We ask them this question because I think often the automatic association is, or the automatic assumption is that kids will go to college, but we want to ask them intentionally, why do you want to go? And if you want to go, and what are you hoping to gain from that experience? In hopes that in their answers, they're drawing out some of their goals and some of their values and centering what is important for them, which connects to the homework assignment, which is where we're asked students to pick a few schools, 2 schools off of the FIS guide, and every child was given a FIS guide. And if you don't know the big, heavy green book, if you have not seen it around at your home, it's because your child may not have picked it up. So encourage them to do so. But we want them to just pick 2 colleges, read through, it's a page-and-a-half review, an overview of the school, and just make light of what stands out, what feels right for them, what resonates, what doesn't resonate, and does it connect to why they want to go to college, so that they're connecting, like we said in the beginning of the session, their values, their hopes, and their dreams first, and making that central to whatever it is that they're eventually going to be looking and researching. So engage in this conversation with your children. If they've done this exercise, ask them what they've learned, ask them what has stood out, because this is going to be really important in their initial stages of the college exploration and search process. So this is part of the work that we'll do as a class, and we'll definitely continue that work individually in our seminar sessions. So I just want to close off with a quick quote, something that we shared in class with students about authenticity. And it reads, being your authentic self should come naturally and easily. Often in the college selection and application process, we are faced with applicants who are forcing themselves into boxes that they think we want to check. We want you to be you, because as much as you want to be here at our university, it is important that the you who shows up is comfortable and doesn't sacrifice their needs to fulfill some perception that this school wants this version of you, and this is how you will achieve enlightenment and the path to contentment. And I really appreciate this quote from Jody Glassman, who's the Associate VP of Enrollment at the university, at Florida International University. because often I think kids approach this process thinking, well, what do they want? How do I have to check off these boxes? How am I going to stand out in this process? What makes me different and unique? And you will never know why you were admitted to a particular institution. And because of that, it behooves you to just be who you are, not feel like you have to fabricate something that's not quite there to fit a mold of what you think others want from you. That's exhausting. That gets really tiring really, really quickly. But the more that we can encourage our children to be just who they are and who are they meant to be, I think it results in a college process that feels more healthy and more whole, and the kids can take the time to reflect on who they are and do so in a way that feels authentic to where they are, as opposed to feeling like they're forcing themselves to be something that they're not. So this is a quote that I just want to leave you all with as we conclude today's session. Our next steps, if you haven't done so already, please submit your family letter to your college counselor. We want to have our second meetings with you and your children, and we're free to do so once you do that and your child completes a self-assessment for your college search survey, so that we can have conversations about what your child is thinking about, what their needs are, and we can help them build a research list and really get this process started. If you have not received an invitation for SCORE, please let me know. This is the platform that we will be using to manage the application process. It is rich with information and with data, and parents also have access to this platform as students do. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to stop my screen share for now. I know this was probably a lot to take in, but I'm hoping that this was informative. I'm hoping that this was thoughtful. We're going to have more continued conversations about this process, but I want to open up the floor for any questions that you may have at this juncture. If you want to type them in the box, if you want to just unmute yourself, totally up to you. Yeah, Luisa.
I'm just sort of curious if you could give a quick sense, clearly there are lots of colleges out there, and as a parent, you start wanting to expose your child and say, what about this place? Or why don't you look at this? Like, where do you feel like the overwhelm factor is, or where are we getting ahead of you and your process with them? Do you recommend being like, here's a few websites as a parent, I know you might want to look at these places? Like, I have not a very good sense of how much to be doing right now.
That's a great question. And interestingly enough, it's so dependent on the student. Again, teenagers, gotta love them. They love listening to their parents all the time. Some students are really open. If you say, hey, I know you, I know you well enough to have a sense of what you're thinking about. So here, let's sit down for an info session. It won't hurt us, won't cost us a thing. Let's just listen and see what stands out. And some children will be really receptive to that and appreciative of it for you taking that initiative. Others, and I say this because I've heard it, can be quite resistant to that, because the students are interpreting that as, my parents think like I'm not being heard on what I want, and they're just forcing their ideas on me, right? Which of course is never quite what the intentions are, but this is how some students do interpret that information. So I will always say that beginning the conversation with, what are you thinking about? What's important to you? What do you want? And helping and giving the floor for this child to just express whatever it is that is on their mind. And sometimes they don't know, they have no idea. And this is where we come in and we work in partnership. A good starting point is the self-assessment survey that we shared with students, because that survey is not about colleges specifically, it's about preferences. It's questions like, how big do you want your future school to be? Where do you want to be in the globe? Do you want to be in a city? Do you want to be somewhere rural? Do you want to go somewhere with a religious affiliation? What do you want to do and spend your free time with? How do you want to spend your free time in your afternoons or your weekends? What do you value? What is central to your search? Because having that information can then help us identify good opportunities for students, right? So if a student tells me, Frank, I want to go to a really small school, it would be irresponsible for me to say, okay, great. Why don't you think about Ohio State University? It has 60,000 people, right? They're going to think, okay, this person's not listening to me. But the more that we can excavate and ask questions for them to continue thinking about, the better, because they will change their minds. Their thoughts will evolve. And what they say today may not be what they say in June, and may not be what they feel in September, because sometimes they just need the exposure to kind of begin thinking about what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And if we give them the space and the agency to say, this is the life that you want to live, you're going to spend 4 years here. How are you going to make the best of it? And giving them that space to just answer authentically and honestly can be a really, really, really powerful starting point.
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions? Okay. This is the beginning of many, many conversations. I want to thank you all so much for being with me this afternoon. Our next session is going to be on February 28th. So I know I said the 29th initially, but we are going to be on our mini masters, so we won't be here. But our next session will be on Wednesday, the 28th, where we'll talk about how do you help your child conduct effective college research. So very much to this point that was just brought up. I look forward to seeing you all there. Until then, be well, be good, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you around.